There she is, recording started. Thank you. Welcome to lesson 13. This is on unit 9. We're on unit 9, creative writing techniques. In this lesson, we are going to be covering unit 9.1, appeal to the senses. Unit 9.2, colour and contrast. Unit 9.3, setting. Unit 9.4, characterization and narrative voice. And 9.5, dialogue and thought. So it's a hefty unit, this one we're going to be covering. So as usual with the big units, I have covered something of every single unit of every lesson from your Cloudport information, but there will be more. There will be extra information on your Cloudport if you want to go and read a bit extra about that. Don't just watch these lessons, always do go and do your own work on the Cloudport information, but we've delved a bit deeper and gone interactive on some of them here. So you might have seen these before if you're ahead of this. If you're not quite up to this yet, Rodri, this might be brand new for you. So appeal to the senses. In this section, we will be discussing some common techniques that are used in both non-fiction and fiction to create interesting and imaginative stories that engage the reader and create a detailed image in their mind of the events that unfold. These techniques cover topics such as appealing to the sense, colour and contrast, characterization, setting, atmosphere, speech and thought. This section should help you improve your understanding of imaginative pieces of writing and your ability to write detailed stories. One imaginative technique used by authors of both non-fiction and fiction is to appeal to the reader's 5 senses. Therefore, when describing something like an object, an author can appeal to the reader's senses by explaining in detail what something feels like, what something smells like, what something looks like, what something tastes like, and what something sounds like. When an author gives a detailed description of these attributes, it gives the reader a better understanding of what the object is like, almost as if it is there right in front of them as they are reading. Would anybody like to suggest any phrases we could use if we were writing about the setting pictured here? Remember to use the 5 senses. What could we say about the picture here? Shout out or put in the chat, however you're comfortable.
Looks.
Tabitha said it looks colourful. Yes, that is definitely a sight one, isn't it? It's very bright, very colourful. Anything else? What other senses can we talk about in this picture? What can we imagine?
Oh, okay. Because I just said what the different sections.
Yeah, looks. You can definitely see the looks. It's definitely colourful. What would it sound like there? What can we imagine that might sound like? If you're describing that setting to a reader, how would you describe its sound?
Well, it's obviously, it looks like an arcade where people are buying stuff.
That's it, yeah.
You probably can hear loads of people like talking at once. Yeah,
I imagine so. Yeah, Tabitha's put peaceful. That's really interesting. So yeah, you've put peaceful because there is only a few people in this picture. I imagine arcades, bazaars to be really noisy, really chatty. So that's really interesting. We've both got different depictions, and that's also a really good reason that you should put in how, as a writer, you're imagining this place so that other people are getting what you're imagining, not what they might be used to. You know,
if you could make you think.
Yeah, go on, Rodri.
It makes me think of if you have a look at some of the lights, some of them are like a Chinese light. So
yeah, they are. They're beautiful.
It could make you think of something like Chinese New Year or.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, so that would be like a place setting, wouldn't it? You could talk about that when you're talking about setting. We'll come on to setting soon. Well done on that one, Rodri. But yeah, really good. Well done, Tabitha. Well done, Rodri. Good examples. Let's keep going. So this poem is taken from your Cloudport information. You may have seen this, but it is all there. The poem's there in full. This is a section from it. And this poem is entitled An Unknown Girl and is written by Maniza Alvi. It starts, in the evening bazaar, studded with neon, an unknown girl is henna in my hand. She squeezes a wet brown line from a nozzle. She is icing my hand, which she steadies with hers on her satin peach knee. In using very few words here, the author manages to convey to us exactly what the setting looks and feels like for her. Lots of colourful descriptions are given in these lines of poem. Firstly, the girl is described as studded with neon, which gives the impression she's wearing bright clothes or has tattoos or piercings maybe. In using this word, we're given a vivid mental picture of the girl and also an indication to her personality maybe. Secondly, the henna itself is described as a wet brown line. This is a very apt description if you've ever had henna yourself or you've seen it implied. This is likely to evoke strong memories of that by describing the feeling and the sensation here. These two adjectives here tell us that the henna feels wet and looks brown. Thirdly, the writer describes the girl's satin peach knee. This tells us what she looks and feels like, suggesting she is smooth to the touch and a warm peachy colour. Later in the poem, the writer says, "Now the furious streets are hushed." This evokes a sense of sound, telling us how the streets sound and that they are quiet, but at the same time managing to tell us that they are normally very loud. We can imagine the busy, rushed street becoming empty and that this isn't the norm while reading this very short line. We also see a linguistic feature being used here, one that we've talked about before in the past. So we're going to have a poll now to see if you can remember what this feature might be. So now the furious streets are hushed. Is that a metaphor, personification, or alliteration? I'm going to do the poll now. But it's been a while since we did any of these, so don't worry, don't panic. Let me launch the poll. As usual, I can see when the votes come in and what you voted for, but I cannot see who voted, so don't worry, don't be afraid, just have a go for it. Well done, lots of you having a go at this, good job. It is tricky, we've been a long time off this subject now, haven't we? We've gone on to exams and coursework and we've gone harder and harder, we've forgotten this original stuff. Well done, thank you very much. Let me share the results with you. So most of you there said B, personification, and that is absolutely right. We have given a personality, a trait of a human characteristic to the streets. They're furious and they're now hushed. You know, streets are not furious, they cannot be hushed. That is a personal trait and we have put it onto them. So well done everybody that said personification, very well remembered. So in the poem we just looked at, we mentioned how the author used bright and colourful descriptions to convey warmth and beauty of her surroundings. By using bright colours, an author is often creating warm, joyful atmosphere. This means that other than simply looking bright, they also feel warm and have a tone of joy. Therefore, colours tell us how a place feels as well as what it looks like. They set the scene and also the tone of the piece. In the way that we just talked about colours creating a tone and atmosphere, light and dark can also do this. One can create a tone of safety and stability, the other of haunting and anxiety. In your anthology, you'll find the example, "Whistle and I'll Come to You," from The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. This extract is in your Cloudport information. You'll see the extract in its entirety there, but for now I'm going to put individual sentences up and you're going to tell me if you think the words used in the sentences evoke a positive or a negative tone and atmosphere. So this first one here, "I reflected on how long Eel Marsh House had stood here, steady as a lighthouse." Do you think that's positive or negative? We're talking about light and dark here, how the light and dark is depicted. So this one mentions light, lighthouse. Is it used in a positive or a negative way? The poll is up now. You should be able to see the poll now. Oh, well done. Very quick, everybody. Good job. You all feel much better after that first poll. You all got back into the swing of polls. Good job. Let me share the results with you. Well done. Nearly all of you said positive on that one. Absolutely is. Yeah, very positive. So Eel Marsh House stood here as steady as a lighthouse. Steady is a good thing. A lighthouse is a good thing, you know. There's a storm battling on outside, but you're in a lighthouse which has weathered millions of storms and you're going to be okay. So yeah, well done. That little tiny sentence gives us a lot of information, doesn't it? And the fact that the reader feels very positive in this lighthouse-like place. So the next one, "From somewhere out of that howling darkness, a cry came to my ears, catapulting me back into the present and vanquishing all tranquility." So we're talking again about the light and dark. Sorry, let me relaunch the poll. Is the light out or dark being used here in a positive or a negative light? What kind of tone and atmosphere do we get from this? This one talks about darkness instead of the light. Is the darkness positive or negative? That's it. That's everybody. I'll share it with you. All of you said negative. And yes, you are right. Howling darkness. That sounds terrifying. So in this example, the light was good. It was positive. It was safe. And the dark is negative and it's bad and it's scary. Next example. The lights went out. I had not bothered to pick up my torch from beside my table, and now I stood in the pitch darkness, unsure for a moment of my bearings. Oh, this one mentions light and dark. So what feeling, what tone do we get from this? Positive or negative? We're talking about light and dark here. Well done. You have all said negative. Absolutely right. So the light that was our safety, the light that was positive has gone out and now the darkness is inside. Before we were in the lighthouse. Go on, Rodri.
I was going to say darkness a lot of the time is going to be negative.
It can be, but sometimes it can be, you can have the comforting darkness. You could talk about the warm enveloping darkness surrounding you and comforting you. You know, it depends how it's written, but the howling darkness is always going to be a bad thing. And for that darkness to come inside into your safety, which was light, for the lights to go out is very symbolic. You couldn't show more vividly that the scary bit has come.
From a Christian perspective, though, they say that obviously that about the light, in a lot of quotations.
Yes, the light means good, doesn't it? Yeah, very, very true.
Well, in parables, shall I say?
Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about that. Yeah. So yeah, often light is good, dark is bad, very, very often. But you do need to pay attention to the particular tone and the depiction in the particular book that you're reading. But this is a very good example of that. So let me find where I am. As we can see from those examples, the light is depicted as positive and the dark is negative. The simile of the house being like a lighthouse describes the strength of the house and how it keeps people secure. The reader can imagine a warm atmosphere inside with the character safe and secure in bed. The howling darkness is another example of personification, and the scary and nightmarish image of the dog howling outside juxtaposes with the light and security of inside. Light and dark come together in the third quote we just looked at, where the comforting light goes out and now the scary darkness is inside, creating a suspenseful and terrifying atmosphere. Another imaginative technique used by Hill, which is closely related to her contrast of light and darkness, is the description of a vivid setting through interesting word choice and imagery. Setting is the place or type of surroundings where something is positioned or where an event takes place. By describing the setting in detail, the audience can visualize the character's surroundings and how they interact with it. Moreover, it could play a vital role in the story that unfolds, as we see in Hill's extract. The setting is very important because the actions taking place around the narrator and what the setting looks like create the haunting atmosphere that is integral to the purpose of this piece of horror fiction. In this extract, I'm going to read you now from The Woman in Black, the setting is the Eel Marsh house and its surroundings. Throughout this passage, the narrator describes details of both inside and outside the house to increase the terrifying mood and convey his fear to the reader. This is particularly evident in the opening paragraph shown here. During the night, the wind rose. As I had lain reading, I had become aware of the stronger gusts that blew every so often against the casements. But when I awoke abruptly in the early hours, it had increased greatly in force. The house felt like a ship at sea, battered by the gale that came roaring across the open marsh. The windows were rattling everywhere, and there was a sound of moaning down all the chimneys of the house and whistling through every nook and cranny. This paragraph gives us a huge amount of detail about the setting, so let's have a look at what we can work out from this passage. That's the same passage there. I've just moved it over a bit so we can do this exercise. So the time of day, what time of day can we get from this passage? This is just the opening paragraph and it gives us so much information about the setting. So what's the time of day here? Night.
Well, I think everyone will get that one.
Yeah, definitely. It's very, very clear, isn't it? Early morning, Tabitha, could well be. Yeah, it's definitely dark though, isn't it? Yeah, I woke abruptly in the early hours. So yeah, early morning, nighttime, definitely. Well done. Let's look at the next one. The weather. Again, pretty easy, that one, isn't it? What is the weather? Storm, meadow, yeah, well done. Yeah, very well done. Yeah, it doesn't say anywhere, does it? Strong winds, Tabitha, well done. It doesn't say there is a storm. It doesn't say that anywhere because it doesn't need to. That would be too obvious, wouldn't it? Saying
Yeah, it's like stormy, like almost windy weather.
Yeah, so rather than saying there is a storm, they're describing the effects of the storm, the wind and the rain and the how it's affecting you inside. So yeah, much better than just merely telling. You're showing the reader how the weather is affecting you. Where the character is. So where is our character in this paragraph? In bed, Tabitha. Yes, he is. Absolutely. Definitely in bed. Yeah. As I had lain reading. So yeah, and he awoke in the early hours. So that we're pretty much told that he's in bed without saying, I am in bed and there's a big storm. Yeah, well done. The strength of the wind. So we know there's a storm. We know that there's a wind, but how strong is this wind? We're talking a gentle breeze. Like a ship at sea, Casper. Very good. Yeah, like a ship at sea. So if your house is feeling like a ship at sea, chances are it's extremely windy. Yeah, that's a really, really good metaphor there, isn't it? Roaring, Tabitha, excellent. Very strong wind, Rodri. Yeah, definitely. This is not a normal storm. You can't imagine a book being written about a normal storm. It wouldn't be worth it, would it? So yeah, definitely a very, very wild storm. Sounds terrifying. How much is the storm on the character's mind? Can we tell from this opening passage how worried he is about the storm? How much is he thinking about it? A lot, Tabitha. Yes, he is. He's very, very worried, isn't he? A lot because he is, yeah, it's all he's describing. He's not talking about anything else. So he's been to sleep. He's been reading a book. He hasn't told you anything about those. He hasn't told you anything.
Is it from that, what that picture is like as well?
No, I got that picture based on this. I thought, oh,
it
well,
is similar. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
because that light thing is like him looking out the window, and then all that.
Yeah. Well done. So I read this and I thought I'll find a picture that shows how I'm imagining it. And that was how I imagined it, like a lighthouse. He's not in a lighthouse. That was a metaphor. But yeah, he imagines himself to be in a lighthouse surrounded by a storm. So that was the picture that I thought would be a really good impression of the setting that he's given across. So yeah, from that opening paragraph, we get a lot more than what he's telling us, don't we? We understand how bad this storm is and how worried he is about it. So we can imagine when it goes dark, how scared he will be. Well done, everybody. So characterization. This characterization is the way that a character is constructed during a story. When we begin reading a text, we usually have no knowledge of the character's personality. Therefore, authors will often use a type of language or imagery that conveys to the readers the personality and traits of a character. For example, if a character is greedy or malicious, the author might use very negative language and imagery when describing this person and their actions. Whereas if a character is kind and generous, the author might use positive language and imagery. This can be done either directly by telling the audience what a person is like, by using phrases such as, Stephen is a very helpful boy, or Jack is a wicked boy. It can also be done indirectly by showing things that suggest what a character is like. For example, Stephen ran full speed to hold the door open for the elderly couple. Or, I don't care if the dog gets better or not, said Jack. So from both these examples, direct and indirect, we can see that Stephen is lovely and likes to help, and Jack is not very nice, doesn't care about dogs. So, narrative voice.
Was that Stephen?
That was Jack. Jack doesn't care about the dog. Look, he's horrible.
No, I meant the picture.
Oh, yeah, that's Stephen. Look at him. He's lovely. He's ready to help. Look at him. Ready to help the elderly.
I was just
That's
seeing
not Jack. Jack's a horrible boy. I wouldn't get a picture of Jack. As we have previously learned, there are different ways by which you can narrate a story. The most popular methods are first-person narrative, in which the narrator uses the pronouns I or we, or in third person, in which the narrator uses the pronouns he, she, or they. The way that the story is narrated can be pivotal to how the audience relates to a story. Let's look first at first person narrative. On the one hand, the use of a first personal narrator can create a personal bond between the narrator and the audience, and it can make the story feel realistic and immediate. On the other hand, the narrator that the author has created might be very unlikable or unreliable. Therefore, their own personal retelling of the story might seem one-sided or prejudiced. Therefore, there are pros and cons to this type of narrative. So what about third-person narrative? Well, a third-person account can be objective, giving a fair account of all that occurred without any prejudice. But on the other hand, this can take away from the immediacy and realism of the story. Neither way is right or wrong. Instead, it's crucial to select the type of narration that suits your audience and purpose. We talk about this every lesson.
Does that mean, is this like passing a conversation on to someone?
No, so this is the way that a book is written. So fiction, if it's so Harry Potter,
Yeah.
we all know that Harry Potter is written.
You know, like when you said
Harry
third
himself.
person narrative, it sounds as though it's a third person's view.
No, so it's written as a third person. So for example, Harry Potter, you don't get the I walked down the road, I woke up. It's Harry woke up, Harry did this. So that's called third person, because Harry is the main character that we see the world through his eyes, but we don't see the world from his mind. Harry doesn't say I. We see the word Harry. J.K. Rowling writes, Harry woke up, Harry saw his friends. That's third person. If you think of a famous book like Moby Dick, Call Me Ishmael, that's a first person narrative because he is talking to you. He's saying, call me Ishmael. When you hear his thoughts, he says, I am going to get up. I am going to get on a boat. I am going to tell you really, really dull bits about how to.
Oh, yeah. I know what you mean by first.
But that's in his mind. That's first person.
I know what you mean by first. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's pros and cons to both. First person is often described as being one of the most, you feel like the most connected to a story, the most connected to a character because you're hearing it from them. But you might not like the character, in which case that will completely put you off the book. Whereas third person, I don't really like Harry Potter, but it doesn't matter because the third person.
I don't really like Harry
Potter. Oh no, I like the book. I just don't really like Harry as a character. He's a bit dull. But third person keeps you away enough that it doesn't really matter. So both of them have got their pros and cons. If in an exam you are asked to write any type of fiction or a personal account, you will have to naturally choose first person or third person. You might not even be thinking about it in that terms. You might just go, I did this or he went there. But then by doing that, you have made the choice first person or third person. Does that make sense, Roger?
It does. We probably covered this before, and it's just recapping it.
It was
just
like
the way it was described. It sounded like a third person's view, but I know what it means.
Yeah, so third person is basically if you're reading he, she, they, that's third person. If you're reading I, me, we, that's first person. So dialogue and thought are both used extensively in fiction writing, and you will have come across both of these methods. Dialogue is when characters speak out loud, usually to each other. It is conversation. Thought is when we read what a character is thinking to themselves, particularly in first-person narratives. These are often used both together in a story, mixing together to form a coherent narrative. Dialogue can also help you with setting, as if a character speaks with a very strong Glaswegian or Scouse accent, you may see this depicted in the text. A famous example of this is in Trainspotting, when the dialogue and indeed the whole book is written in very strong Glaswegian tones. This is an example from Trainspotting. The whole book is written like this. It's extremely hard to read. I'm not going to attempt to read this out in a Glaswegian accent and butcher it, so you'll just have to imagine it.
I mean, I've watched Trainspotting.
Yeah.
In fact, both films.
It's very good.
The way it's written is not how you would presume that it would be written, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So you can't help them.
I can understand them, but reading that, so you're thinking, and what does that mean?
Yeah, you do get into it, and by the middle of the book, you are reading to yourself in a really thick Scottish accent. You do get a very good Scottish accent going in your head by the middle of it. It does get easier, but it is difficult. But it does tell you exactly where the setting is. You know, even if you get one character speaking like this, you'll know where they're from. It gives you a good idea of the setting. So furthermore, a character using slang or colloquial terms may help you place the character as a certain age. For example, a young person suddenly appearing in a book using modern slang, you would know immediately around about their age. So here is an example from Chinese Cinderella, which we have previously looked at and which you can find in your CloudPort information. This shows how dialogue can be used alongside and in between thought from the main character. This is written in first person, so we see the author, Adeline Yen Ma's thoughts as the story occurs. Full of foreboding, I ran downstairs as in a nightmare, wondering who had died this time. Father's chauffeur assured me everyone was healthy. Then why are you taking me home? I asked. How should I know? He answered defensively, shrugging his shoulders. Your guess is as good as mine. They give the orders and I carry them out. During the short drive home, my heart was full of dread and I wondered what I had done wrong. Our car stopped at an elegant villa at mid-level, halfway up the hill between the peak and the harbour. Where are we? I asked foolishly. Don't you know anything? The chauffeur replied rudely. This is your new home. Your parents moved here a few months ago. So as you can see here, there is a mix of dialogue, speech. She's speaking to the chauffeur, he's speaking back to her. But in amongst that, there's also lots and lots of thought. She's telling you what she thinks between the words. So let's do a true or false poll from what we can get from this without her having to tell us. So let me launch the poll. So Yen Ma is an anxious child. So just here, by hearing her inner thoughts and her dialogue with the chauffeur, can we deduce that Yen Ma is an anxious child? A, true, or B, false? Well done. Let me share the results. Every single one of you said Yen Ma is an anxious child. Yeah, she definitely is. She's full of foreboding. She's running downstairs. She's very scared that she's done something wrong or that someone's died. Yeah, she sounds absolutely full of anxiety and doesn't sound like an easy life, does it?
I know, I can relate to anxiety.
Oh, would that be the first thing going through your mind, something negative as well? There's a lot of us like that. When we hear we've got news, we automatically think, oh, it's bad news. So Yen Ma gets on well with her family. True or false? What do we think from this very, very short passage? True or false? She gets on well with her family. Well done. Couple more votes. There we go. Well done. Right, I'm going to share the poll with you now. Most of you there said B, she gets on well with her family. It doesn't sound like it, does it? A chauffeur comes to pick her up and she says, I think I'm in trouble.
I pressed it just as you were coming through and a message came up, said it's something like too late to, but I did say B, but
don't worry, it's okay.
A message came up because it was just finishing.
Yeah, no, she definitely doesn't get on with her family. What's another way that we can see from this passage that she doesn't get on with her family? So there's the way that she thinks that something bad has happened. She thinks she's in trouble. Is there another example from this passage that we can see that she doesn't get on well with her family?
Well, I mean, what I could see that she didn't get, it says your parents moved away a few months ago.
Yeah.
Almost as if she doesn't
know where they live.
She doesn't even know that her parents have moved away.
No, she doesn't know where her own home is. No, she has no idea. Yeah, well done for picking up on that, Rodri. So again, without saying, I don't get on with my family, the author has said it to us. So that is how important your word choice is. That is how important things like dialogue and internal thought are, because they can say what you don't need to say expressively. So the chauffeur is rude. Do we get that from this passage? Do we get that the chauffeur is rude? Is he just a man doing his job, or is he actually quite rude to this young child? Oh, well done. All the votes are in. Let me share the results. Yeah, nearly all of you there said that true. Yeah, the chauffeur is rude. What made you say that then? Where do we get the rudeness from in this passage?
I mean, let me have a look. He answered defensively, shrugging his shoulders. So almost as if he's not bothered.
Yeah, he's not bothered, is he? Yeah, and definitely Meadow says he replied rudely. Tabitha, it does say straight out he replied rudely. Alex has raised his hand. Go on, Alex, tell us. Oh, with a lighthouse picture as well. Very thematic. Well done, Alex.
He also says, don't you know anything, which isn't a polite thing to say.
Very good, very well spotted. Yeah. If the person that hires you and pays you says, can you pick up my young child? Is that the way that you would speak to them? It's not, is it? That's very, very rude. I don't appreciate that at all. Yep. So we get that again, don't we, from the way that she's written this. And remember, this is exactly what we call the first person account. And this is when what we just spoken about with the pros and cons comes into play. So she tells us that this is a really rude chauffeur. He's very horrible. But what if she's telling that from her perspective? What if he wasn't? What if this is her remembering that he was meaner than he was? And that is a pitfall of a first person narration. It's very hard to, there's always two sides to a story. And with first person, we're only getting one side. So if this was a third person and it said, she went downstairs and the chauffeur said this, we're far more likely to believe it because we're not hearing it from her side. Okay. So that's not an issue at the minute. We're not talking about that right now. I just thought I'd pull that in because we were talking about first person and third person, about how that can be perceived. Yes, he is really, really rude, but is that her perception of it, or is that the accurate story of how it happened? Well done, you all did amazing on that poll. Awesome. 10 out of 10. So what have we learned in this lesson? We have learned that appealing to the reader's senses will draw them into your story and give them a clearer idea of what is being described. That the setting can play a pivotal role in your story. That imagery is the use of visual descriptions or figurative language to create an image in the reader's mind. That a detailed and imaginative description of the setting will enhance the reading experience and bring your reader closer to the story. That describing the setting can be an interesting way to begin a story. That there are many ways to narrate a story and all of them have a different effect on the way the story is read. And that dialogue and thought can show the reader what a character is like and play a vital role in the telling of a story. Thank you very much for coming to the lesson again. Thank you all for joining in. You all did very, very well on the polls. There was a few questions in there that we haven't covered for ages. So well done for remembering. You've all been doing your revision. That was excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah.